I took my husband to his dentist. The doctor checked his X-ray and froze. She pulled me aside. My new story is right here.
My husband's dentist pulled me into the hallway, shut the door behind us, and told me that the 4 fractures in Rowan's jaw didn't come from chewing walnuts. That was the sentence that split my life into 2 halves, the before and everything after. I'm Thea Hefner. I'm 31. I work as a payroll coordinator for a mid-sized trucking company in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Garber and Sons Freight. Been there 7 years. My brain is wired for numbers. I notice when a gas station charges $3.47 instead of the $3.39 on the sign. I notice when the grocery receipt rings up 2 avocados instead of 1. I notice everything that doesn't add up. And for 7 months, I had been noticing my husband's injuries without noticing what they actually meant. Rowan is 34. He co-owns a residential remodeling company with his older brother Callum, Hefner Brothers Remodeling. They do kitchens, bathrooms, the occasional basement conversion. Rowan is the one who shows up at 6 in the morning with his tool belt on. Callum is the one who wears button-downs to job sites and calls himself the business side. They started the company about 3 years ago, and for a while, things were good, or at least I thought they were. That November morning, the reason we were at Dr. Nina Solvang's office on Grampian Boulevard was painfully stupid. Rowan cracked a molar on a walnut. He'd been on this homemade granola kick for weeks. Oats, honey, almonds, walnuts, the whole thing baked on a sheet pan every Sunday night like he was running a health food startup out of our kitchen. I used to joke that the man could remodel a $60,000 kitchen but couldn't eat a snack without filing an insurance claim. Dr. Solvang took the initial X-ray, looked at it, didn't say anything. Then she said she wanted a panoramic image, the kind that wraps around your whole jaw. That's unusual for a cracked tooth. I was sitting in the corner of the exam room scrolling through a payroll discrepancy on my phone. Force of habit. I even worked during dental appointments, and I noticed her face change. It was subtle, like someone who just opened an email they wish they hadn't. She excused herself for about 4 minutes, came back with a tablet. Then she looked at me and said she needed to speak with me privately. In the hallway, she turned the tablet toward me. I'm not a doctor, but I've seen enough X-rays in my life to know what bone looks like. She pointed to 3 spots along Rowan's lower jaw, each one a healed fracture. Different stages of healing, she said, which meant they happened at different times over the past several months. And then the fresh one from today. 4 fractures total. She said this pattern, repeated blunt force trauma to the same area of the face, doesn't come from household accidents, not from ladders, not from cabinet doors, and definitely not from walnuts. I remember the hallways smelled like that fake vanilla they pump through the ventilation in dental offices. There was a poster on the wall of a woman with impossibly white teeth smiling at me like everything was fine. The receptionist was laughing about something at the front desk, and Dr. Solvang was telling me that someone had been hitting my husband in the face, repeatedly, for at least half a year. She told me she couldn't, in good conscience, let us leave without understanding what she was seeing. She offered to document everything clinically, the X-rays, the healing stages, approximate dates, in case we needed it later. My brain did what it always does. It went to the numbers. I started counting backward. April. Rowan came home with a swollen jaw, said he fell off a ladder at a job site on Pine Street. June. Bruise along the left side of his face. Said he caught the edge of a cabinet door they were installing. September. Swelling again, said he tripped carrying a sheet of drywall. And now November, the walnut. 4 incidents, 4 fractures, all on the same side of the jaw. I walked back into the exam room. Rowan was sitting in that reclined dental chair, the paper bib still clipped around his neck, staring at the ceiling. The overhead light was right above him, that big circular fluorescent ring they use, and it made him look washed out, small. He didn't look at me when I came in, and for the first time in 6 years of marriage, I didn't recognize the expression on his face. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was shame, the deep kind, the kind that's been sitting in someone's chest for months, and they've been holding it down with both hands, and now they can feel it rising. I didn't say anything yet. I just stood there in that doorway and felt the floor shift under me, because whatever was about to come out of my husband's mouth was going to change everything I thought I knew about our life. And I was right. Before we continue, please hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Thank you so much for your support. We didn't talk in the dental office. I scheduled the follow-up, took the printed summary of the X-ray findings, and walked to the car with Rowan 2 steps behind me, silent. The kind of silent that has weight to it. I made it about 6 blocks before my hands started shaking on the steering wheel. I pulled into the parking lot of a Wawa on 4th Street, because in Pennsylvania, apparently all life-changing conversations are legally required to happen in a Wawa parking lot. I think it's in the state constitution somewhere between the right to bear arms and the right to soft pretzels. I turned off the engine. Rowan stared through the windshield at a guy loading a hoagie and a Mountain Dew into his truck. Normal Tuesday for that guy. Worst Tuesday of my life. And then Rowan started talking, quietly, like someone confessing something they've rehearsed in their head for months but never thought they'd actually say out loud. He told me about the money first. About 18 months earlier, Callum had started overbilling on projects, not by a little. He'd created phantom subcontractor companies and was routing fake invoices through the business. Rowan estimated about $187,000, siphoned over a year and a half. That number hit me like a physical thing, $187,000. I had cried in our bathroom in August because I couldn't afford new tires for my Subaru. I'd been buying store-brand everything, skipping my own dental cleanings to save $180. And $187,000 had been walking out the back door of our company. Then Rowan told me about the first hit 7 months ago, April. He'd been reviewing the QuickBooks records and found invoices from a drywall subcontractor he'd never worked with on a job that didn't use any outside crew. He confronted Callum at the warehouse after hours. Callum didn't deny it, didn't argue. He hit Rowan in the jaw hard enough to fracture bone, then calmly sat down and explained the facts. Rowan's name was on every contract, every invoice, every tax filing. Callum's exact words: "You go to the cops, we both go down, but I'll make sure you go down harder." And it wasn't just a threat. In September, Rowan had quietly asked a high school buddy who'd become a general practice attorney, just a hypothetical over beers. Could he walk away from the business? The friend told him the truth. His name was on every filing. Walking away wouldn't remove liability. It would look like fleeing. Staying at least let him keep eyes on Callum, so Rowan stayed. And every time he pushed back, June, September, Callum hit him. Always the jaw, always alone at the warehouse, always where it could be explained with a construction story. Callum wasn't losing his temper. He was managing the situation. Strategically, that's what made it so chilling. And Rowan couldn't go to police because any investigation would crack open the books, and his name was on all of them. I sat in that Wawa parking lot feeling 3 kinds of fury at once. Fury at Callum, fury at the trap. It was real, and I couldn't see the exit. And fury at myself. I'm a payroll coordinator. I catch number discrepancies in spreadsheets for a living, and I'd miss this in my own house. Believed every story about ladders and cabinet doors. That evening, I made the first mistake of this whole process. I called Greta, my mother-in-law. I thought surely a mother would want to know one of her sons was beating the other and stealing from the family. Greta listened for about 90 seconds and told me Rowan was probably exaggerating. Callum would never. Maybe Rowan was being too sensitive. Callum was the one who bought Greta her car, a 3-year-old Buick Encore she was very proud of, took her to brunch every Sunday at the Genetti Hotel, paid her cable bill. In Greta's world, a good son is defined as the one who picks up the check, and by that metric, Callum was a saint. That's when it clicked. Every dime of Greta's comfortable life, the Buick, the brunches, the cable, was funded by money stolen from me and Rowan. I'd been clipping coupons for laundry detergent while Callum was buying bottles of wine that cost more than my car payment. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my work laptop. I could hear Rowan breathing in the bedroom, that heavy, exhausted breathing of someone who just set down something he'd been carrying for 7 months. Callum Hefner, the man who thought he was the smart brother, had just made the worst mistake of his career. He messed with numbers in a family that includes a woman who eats spreadsheets for breakfast. I cracked my knuckles, opened QuickBooks, and got to work. Rowan gave me the login to the business QuickBooks account the next morning. His hand was shaking when he wrote the password on the back of an envelope, row HEF 2021, which, for the record, is a terrible password, and I told him so. He laughed for the first time in days. Small, rusty, but it was something. I logged in at the kitchen table before my shift at Garber & Sons, 40 minutes before I had to leave. In 40 minutes, I found enough to know this was worse than Rowan thought. Callum didn't just overbill on existing projects. He'd set up 3 phantom subcontractor companies, entirely separate LLCs that existed on paper and nowhere else. Keystone Ridge Drywall, North Point Plumbing Solutions, Elk Valley Electrical. The name sounded like something you'd generate by Googling, what do contractors call their companies? Vaguely professional, aggressively geographic, zero personality. I've never met a real plumber who names his company North Point Plumbing Solutions. Real plumbers name their companies things like Tony's Pipes with a cartoon wrench on the truck. These names smelled fake from a mile away once you knew what to look for. I pulled up the Pennsylvania Business Registration Database. It's public. Anyone can search it. All 3 LLCs were registered to the same P.O. box, number 341 at a UPS store in Montourville, about 15 minutes from Williamsport. The registered agent on everyone was a woman named Jane Sorrell. Rowan knew who she was, Callum's girlfriend, 26, bartender at a sports bar called the End Zone on Market Street. So the man used his girlfriend as the front for 3 fake companies. A bartender was officially the registered agent for a drywall company, a plumbing company, and an electrical company. I would have laughed if I wasn't so angry. The invoices were sloppy when you knew what to look for. Same formatting template across all 3 companies. Same font, same layout. Several were dated on Sundays. One was dated on the 4th of July. I don't know any subcontractor billing for work on Independence Day. Most of them are at a barbecue like the rest of America. I added up every fake invoice across 18 months. Rowan had estimated $187,000. The actual total was $214,000. The extra $27,000 flowed through while Callum thought nobody was watching. My stomach turned. I thought about the night in August when Rowan and I argued about money, when he couldn't tell me why our profitable business wasn't paying us enough. He wasn't being evasive. He was being a prisoner. That afternoon, I called Dr. Solvang's office and formally requested copies of everything: X-ray images, clinical notes, the written documentation of the fracture pattern with approximate healing dates. 4 fractures, each at a different stage of healing, matching a 7-month timeline. Physical evidence connecting the assaults to the fraud. I also told Rebecca Calloway, my co-worker at Garber & Sons, 2 desks over. Before the trucking company, Rebecca worked as a paralegal for 4 years at a family law firm in Lock Haven. Every woman deserves a Rebecca in her life, but most of us don't find one until everything is already on fire. Rebecca's first words: do not go to the police. If I walk in saying my brother-in-law is embezzling, they investigate the business, find Rowan's name on every contract, and a detective who doesn't know the full picture could charge Rowan as a co-conspirator. I needed a forensic fraud attorney first, someone to organize evidence, protect Rowan, and present a clean case to the DA lawyer first, police second. So I started my nightly routine. Every evening after Rowan fell asleep, I downloaded, screenshotted, and printed every invoice connected to the phantom companies, organized them in a 3-ring binder from Staples, $4, sorted by month and company. My old evenings were 2 episodes of Whatever and a cup of tea. Now I was a forensic accountant in pajama pants, running on anxiety and store-brand chamomile. I also opened a savings account in my own name at a different bank, $50 a paycheck. I didn't know what I was saving for yet. I just knew the version of myself who let someone else handle the money was gone. Then on a Saturday, Callum showed up at our house unannounced. 6-pack in hand, that smile. 10% friendly, 90% surveillance, sat on our couch, complimented the curtains, mentioned Thanksgiving at Greta's. My binder of evidence was in the bedroom closet 15 feet away. While Callum talked to me, he kept glancing at Rowan. Quick looks most people wouldn't catch, studying my husband's face for signs that he'd been talking. Callum left after an hour with a firm, two-pat hug at the door that lingered one beat too long. I had the invoices, the phantom LLCs, the trail to Jane Sorrell, the dental records, and a timeline connecting every hit to every time Rowan pushed back. But I needed one more thing: proof that Callum personally controlled the money in those phantom accounts. Without it, a defense attorney could argue Jane acted alone. I needed a digital fingerprint, and I was pretty sure I knew where to find it. Lowell Abernathy's office was on 2nd Street in Harrisburg, above a sandwich shop called Sal's. I could smell roast turkey through the floorboards while planning the takedown of my brother-in-law. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away. The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. Rebecca found Abernathy through her old paralegal contacts. He specialized in small business embezzlement, not the glamorous kind, but the quiet, ugly kind, where a family member bleeds a company dry. He'd seen it 100 times. I handed him my binder. Every phantom invoice sorted by month and company, the LLC registrations, the P.O. box in Montoursville, Jane Sorrell's name on everything, Dr. Solvang's clinical notes with the X-ray timeline, Rowan's statement matching each injury to a specific confrontation. Abernathy flipped through it for 20 minutes. Then he said the case was strong, but he needed one more element: direct proof that Callum personally controlled the phantom LLC bank accounts. Without that, a defense attorney could argue Callum had no idea what his girlfriend was doing with those companies. Thin, but enough to create doubt. So I went looking. That evening, I logged back into the business system. Not QuickBooks this time, but the email account linked to the company's banking portal. And there it was: wire transfer confirmation emails. Every payment from the business account to the phantom LLCs had a confirmation showing the transfer was initiated from Callum's personal email login. His email, his timestamps, his amounts matching the phantom invoices to the penny. I downloaded everything, printed it, saved copies to 2 USB drives, one in my car, one with Rebecca. At my trucking job, a driver once lost 3 months of mileage logs to a computer crash, and I had to rebuild from scratch. Never forgot that lesson. Now I owned more USB drives than a tech startup, but every one of them mattered. Abernathy reviewed the wire transfer evidence and said it was exactly what he needed. He began preparing the package for the Lycoming County District Attorney's Office, and then Greta made her move. My mother-in-law, the woman who told me Rowan was exaggerating, the woman whose Buick and brunches were funded by our stolen money, called Callum. She told him that Thea had been asking questions, saying things about money being taken, saying Callum had hurt Rowan. Greta didn't do this out of malice. I genuinely believe that. She did it because in her mind, Callum was still the golden son, and she was warning him about a misunderstanding so he could clear it up. She thought she was helping. She was actually lighting a fuse. Callum reacted exactly the way a guilty person reacts. He didn't call me to explain. He didn't call Rowan to talk. He went to the warehouse after hours and started deleting files from the business computer. QuickBooks backups, invoice records, vendor payment histories. He spent a whole evening trying to scrub 18 months of evidence off the hard drive. He also tried to move the remaining money. About $31,000 was still sitting in the phantom LLC accounts. Money he hadn't spent yet. Callum logged into those accounts and attempted a wire transfer to a personal account on a Friday morning. The transfer was declined. Account frozen. See, Abernathy had filed the evidence package with the DA on Wednesday. The DA's fraud division reviewed it Thursday and moved to freeze the phantom accounts Thursday afternoon. By the time Callum tried his transfer Friday morning, he was exactly 1 day too late, which is the financial equivalent of sprinting to catch a bus that pulled away 10 minutes ago. You just end up sweating on the sidewalk with nothing to show for it. And here's the beautiful part. Callum didn't know why the transfer failed. He called the bank. They told him the account was frozen pending investigation. That's all they said. So now Callum knew someone was onto him, but he didn't know who, he didn't know how much they knew, and he didn't know that every file he deleted from that warehouse computer was already sitting in a binder in my bedroom closet and backed up on 2 USB drives. The deleted files didn't hurt us. but they would hurt him. Forensic recovery would later pull those files off the hard drive, and the act of deleting them, that became its own evidence. Consciousness of guilt, Abernathy called it. When you destroy records after learning you're being investigated, that tells a jury exactly what you were thinking. It was Friday evening. Callum was pacing in his apartment trying to figure out who talked. The DA's office had the evidence, the frozen accounts, the dental records, and a cooperating attorney. On Tuesday morning, 4 days away, they were executing the warrant. Callum had no idea what was coming, and for the first time in 7 months, neither did he have control over a single thing. It was November 21st, a Tuesday, 3 days before Thanksgiving. At 8:47 in the morning, Callum Hefner was sitting at his desk in the Hefner Brothers warehouse office on Canal Street, drinking coffee from a gas station cup and scrolling his phone. Same thing he did every morning. Routine. Comfortable. The last comfortable morning of his life. 2 investigators from the Lycoming County DA's Fraud Division walked through the warehouse door at 8:51. They were calm, professional, no shouting, no drama, no Hollywood entrance. One of them handed Callum the warrant. The other started photographing the office. They seized both business computers, an external hard drive from the filing cabinet, 3 boxes of financial records, and a folder of vendor contracts from the bottom drawer of Callum's desk. Callum called his attorney. His attorney told him to cooperate and say nothing, so Callum sat in a folding chair in the corner of his own warehouse and watched strangers pack up his life into evidence boxes. I wasn't there for this part, Rowan told me later. He said Callum looked like a man doing math in his head and not liking the answer. Simultaneously, investigators visited Jane Sorrell at her apartment on Mulberry Street. Jane opened the door in sweatpants, no idea what was happening. When they explained the situation, that the 3 LLCs registered to her name were part of a $214,000 fraud scheme, that she was listed as the registered agent on companies used to embezzle money, and that she was potentially facing felony charges including forgery and conspiracy. Jane sat down on her kitchen floor and started talking. She gave a full statement within an hour. Callum created the companies. Callum told her what to sign. Callum gave her $500 a month and said it was a tax arrangement for the business. She didn't understand the scope of what she was involved in until that moment, sitting on her kitchen tile with 2 investigators and a recording device. Jane Sorrell's biggest crime was trusting a man who gave her $500 a month to not ask questions. A $500 lesson in why you should always read what you're signing. Back at the warehouse, Callum was arrested. The charges: felony theft by deception, forgery, fraud, and simple assault. The assault charges were backed by Dr. Solvang's clinical documentation, the X-ray images showing 4 jaw fractures at different healing stages, her written notes on the trauma pattern, and Rowan's statement connecting each fracture to a specific date and confrontation. The physical evidence corroborated the testimony. It wasn't just Rowan's word, it was bone. No TV cameras, no public scene, no neighbors lined up on the sidewalk, just paperwork, handcuffs, and a county vehicle. The whole thing took less than 2 hours, and somehow that quiet efficiency was worse than any dramatic arrest could have been, because Callum had built his entire identity on being the smart one, the one in charge, the business mind. And it all ended at 8:47 on a Tuesday in a warehouse on Canal Street, without an audience. Rowan was across the street in his truck the whole time. He didn't go inside. He didn't watch. He sat with the engine off and his hands on the steering wheel and didn't say a word until it was over. That evening, Callum made his phone call from county lockup. He didn't call his attorney. He'd already spoken to him. He called Greta. He needed bail money. I would have paid actual money to hear that conversation. Callum, the golden son, the brunch buyer, the cable bill payer, had to tell his mother that he'd been arrested for stealing over $200,000 from his own brother and hitting him in the face 4 times over 7 months. Greta asked about the money, her money, the car, the cable, the Sunday brunches at the Genetti Hotel. Callum told her the accounts were frozen. Everything she'd been living on came from the business accounts, the same accounts now seized as evidence. Greta couldn't make bail. She didn't have the money. The woman whose comfortable life was built on our stolen income didn't have enough in her own savings to help the son who'd stolen it for her. She hung up, and she didn't call me. She didn't call Rowan. She sat in her house with her Buick in the driveway, a car bought with our money, and the silence of a woman who just realized she'd been defending the wrong son for 20 years. That night, Abernathy called me. The DA's forensic team had already done a preliminary review of the seized business computer. In the recovered deleted files, the ones Callum had tried to destroy the week before, they found something that even I hadn't expected. And it was about to make Callum's situation a whole lot worse. Among the deleted files Callum tried to scrub from that warehouse computer, the DA's forensic team recovered draft tax returns, not the ones that were actually filed, a second set. For each of the past 3 years, Callum had prepared 2 versions of the company's tax returns, one with real revenue numbers and one with falsified numbers that he actually submitted. The difference between the two across 3 years was approximately $340,000 in underreported income. This wasn't just Pennsylvania state fraud anymore. Abernathy called me on a Wednesday morning and explained it in plain terms. Filing falsified federal tax returns is a federal crime. The DA's office was referring the tax evidence to IRS criminal investigation. Callum Hefner was now facing state charges and federal charges, 2 separate systems, 2 separate sets of consequences, and neither one was going to be gentle. The walls were closing in on all sides. Callum's attorney tried to negotiate, plead guilty to the fraud charges in exchange for dropping the assault. The DA said no. Dr. Solvang's clinical documentation was too strong. 4 fractures at 4 different healing stages, each one corresponding to a documented confrontation where Rowan pushed back on the embezzlement. The physical evidence corroborated the testimony independently. Bone doesn't lie, and X-rays don't forget. And then came the final piece, the detail that sealed everything shut. Investigators confirmed that Callum's failed wire transfer attempt on that Friday morning, the one that bounced off the frozen accounts, was fully documented in the bank's records. It showed his login credentials, the exact amount he tried to move, $31,216, the timestamp, and the declined status. That single transaction proved 3 things at once. Callum knew the phantom accounts existed, Callum controlled them personally, and Callum tried to move money when he suspected an investigation. His own desperate act became the prosecution's cleanest exhibit. You almost have to admire the efficiency of a man building his own case against himself. Callum's bail was set high enough that it might as well have been a wall. Jane Sorrell wouldn't post it. She was cooperating with prosecutors and wanted her name as far from Callum Hefner as geographically possible. Greta couldn't afford it. The money she'd lived on for years was frozen, and her own savings without Callum's monthly supplements turned out to be almost nothing. The man who always had money for everyone suddenly couldn't buy his own way out of a county holding cell. With Callum removed, Rowan became the sole owner of the business. The company name was damaged. You can't have arrested for fraud attached to your brand and pretend nothing happened, but Rowan's personal reputation with clients was intact. He was the one who showed up at 6 in the morning, did clean work, returned calls on weekends. The clients knew which brother actually built their kitchens. Rowan rebranded, dropped Hefner Brothers. Now it's just Rowan Hefner Remodeling. New logo, new invoicing system, clean books. I took over all the accounting, permanently. Every invoice, every payment, every vendor entry runs through me now. Nobody will ever steal from this company again. Dropping Brothers from the name was probably the best rebrand in central Pennsylvania history, and I say that as someone who's seen a lot of questionable small business names in this state. Greta never apologized. She didn't call to make things right or explain herself or ask for forgiveness. She just stopped calling. The phone that used to ring every Sunday with her opinions about our life went quiet. Months later, she mailed a short birthday card to Rowan. No mention of Callum, no "I'm sorry," just "Happy Birthday" in her name. It wasn't closure, but it was the most honest thing she'd sent in years. And maybe, for a woman who spent 20 years choosing the wrong son, silence was the closest she could get to admitting it. I'm sitting in Dr. Solvang's dental chair as I tell you this. Not Rowan, me. I'm finally getting my own teeth cleaned. The appointment I put off for over a year because I couldn't justify spending $180 on myself while we were behind on the mortgage. Dr. Solvang asked me how I'm doing. I told her I'm doing just fine. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. Some people think revenge is about making a scene. It's not. It's about making sure the numbers add up and that the right person pays the bill. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. If you enjoyed this story, more of my best ones are already on your screen. Just tap one. I promise you won't regret it. See you in the next one.